Hello and welcome to this live training webinar. I'm Chris Badgett from LifterLMS, and I'm joined by Michael Greenberg. And today we're going to get into the Course Builders Content 101, Strategy, Authority, and Your First Steps to ROI. Michael, welcome. Thank you for coming on here. I really appreciate it.
Chris, thanks for having me today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed I really enjoyed our last conversation on the podcast, which is just coming out. We've got it up on YouTube and it's going to be hitting the iTunes airwaves. But getting into it with you, you have such clear thinking and strategies that are really actionable, which is what I really love about your style and how you can help course creators. So I'm really excited to get into this. And just a few housekeeping items. I'd encourage everybody to stay to the end. We are going to be doing a LifterLMS giveaway at the end, and Michael has a special offer available as well. There is this training should be interactive, so if you have questions, speak up. Michael's going to take questions at various points in the presentation so that we can get into it while everything's fresh. And yeah, that's all the housekeeping items. Michael, take us to school. I'm really excited to see where we're going today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So this really is designed as something where you can follow along. And I want to stress that if you got a pad of paper in front of you, you take a couple notes, and I'll be happy to walk through examples specific to you as we get to those points for questions throughout. So diving in, the goal. There's really only one goal that matters. And that's leads. That's people who are going to pay you money for things at the end of the day. If you're putting out a course, my guess is that course is going to be used to make money somehow. And so you don't want to end up getting 10,000 people who are never going to buy from you. You want 10 people who actually will. And what's important to remember is that leads are really just relationships. And as the price of the course that you're selling gets lower, you need more relationships. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you scale that relationship building with one-to-many communication and with things like email and podcasts and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, you really need to know who you're going to be selling to. And that's what the bulk of this entire presentation, this whole class, this webinar, whatever you want to call it, is about. It's figuring out who is the best group to sell to and what kind of content do they actually want. Now, audience building is the other side, because you really have to look at your total audience versus the people who will actually buy the course. Because many times what we find is that people put out content and they put out great free content, but that great free content is just not designed to help somebody into buying things from you in the future. Or it's not targeted to the group of people who is actually most likely to buy. And so to put an example in play, this is an example I think we used during the podcast as well, is my dad's got a real estate business. And his real estate business is focused in the St. Louis area. And he's creating a course for commercial apartment investors in the St. Louis area on how to do a profitable multifamily investment strategy. And so for him, there's a very small number of people that have the budget requirements, have the income, have the money to be able to do that. But there's tons of people who want to make money in real estate. And so knowing those terms, understanding that his best buyers are going to be the doctors who want that passive income but don't have the time to do it themselves, means that he's going to be building his strategy around targeting them instead of just anyone who would want to invest in real estate. And so audience building is a good option. I'm not going to say it's the worst move in the world, but if you don't know who's going to pay you and you just go out and build audience, you're going to run into a problem. And so the real benefit with audience building is in this little statement right here. A larger audience will increase your perceived value, which means you can charge more, you're more famous, and most importantly, you can partner with larger people who will have larger audiences of their own that might include those good potential leads for you. That being said, you've got to make all those connections. You've got to actually translate that perception into value for yourself. And if you're selling something high ticket, if you're selling a more personalized course that might have interactive elements, then that can translate much more directly. But if you're selling your one-off, self-serve, download it and go course, then the real value in audience building only comes into play if you make sure those audiences that you build can turn into leads, can turn into sales for you. And so what this really comes down to is that you're building a list. You're building likely a list of emails with this content, and you want it to be as big as possible. But knowing that you want to build the relationship, you want to build trust before they buy from you, you want to think of it more as farming. And so if you get an email in your list, it might take 6 months before they decide to buy your course. And content is the way you help keep nurturing and watering and keep them going and building that trust at scale until the point that they're ready to buy. And so before we get into authority, which is key to building that trust, pause here for any questions.
That's awesome. If you guys have questions, use the chat or the Q&A box. Just a question for you, Michael. What's a mistake where somebody's farming, or they're not farming and they're doing something else? Can you give an example that's kind of spinning the wheels?
Yeah. So, and this is an example that I'm picking out because I know somebody who's been really successful with this strategy, but it is opposite of the way I would go about it. And there's a guy I know who will bring up as a couple of examples throughout his strategy. I don't want to give his name since I'm going to talk bad too. But what he does is he uses his podcast to reach out to potential webinar partners.
Okay.
And that's a great strategy right there. But then leading up to the webinar, you get like 20 emails, and directly after the webinar, all of his webinars are quote unquote no replay. Of course, There's a replay. I found it. It took 2 seconds to Google. But then if you subscribe to that, he's going to follow up with a sequence of 10 emails over the next 5 days for sales. And it's extraordinarily sales focused.
Okay.
He does well with that, but that's because he's doing a B2B course. So, his ticket price is $1,500. And he's got 16,000 emails in his list at this point. When he partners with someone, he's only partnering if they have over 5,000 emails in their list. And he's looking for, like a 0.5% conversion.
Right.
But he's hammering all these thousands of people.
So it's very aggressive.
Yeah. And that level of aggression is just what I'm not about that. I like slow and steady, build the relationship, prove your authority, and then when I want to buy, I'll let you know.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that'll resonate with the LifterLMS crew about, you know, not being too aggressive on the sales side. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions before we move on, you guys? I think you're good to roll on.
Great. So I've talked about trust, and I've talked about leads first off, and the goal. But the way we get there is using authority, and more specifically, improving your authority to these high value target audiences of potential buyers. And the number one thing to think about with authority is that it's relative. It doesn't matter if all lawyers think you're an expert in marketing to lawyers. It only matters if the one lawyer on your list who wants to buy your course on marketing to lawyers thinks you're an expert in marketing to lawyers. And that's really important to remember, because you have to think about everything relative to your authority and the person you're contacting. Do they respect you? Do they know you? How did they get on your list? If somebody subscribes to my list after watching this webinar, I know they know a good about what I do, and hopefully they already think that I'm kind of an authority, that I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to this content marketing and positioning stuff. But if somebody comes in off of just Google search, that's a totally different situation. And so authority, going back to perception from that big list before, nobody knows you've got a big list if you don't use it. And if they don't see you with other people who have those big followings. And so just keep in mind, keep in the back of your head, whenever you're thinking about writing copy, whenever you're thinking about designing your course, think about who you are trying to target specifically, because that will allow you to get really focused on how you communicate with them and make everything look like it's one-to-one, even when it goes broader. So authority is relative. And as we talked about perception before, perception is the people who are coming in, they're subscribing to your list. Maybe they're even buying a small course or some extra thing you've got. Maybe they're buying the whole course. That's all perception. You don't have to know anything about what you're selling in order to develop a course and sell that course. But for people to actually take the course and learn from it and want to buy the next course you put out, or want to buy what you come up with next, or even actually completing the course, you need the expertise. And so authority is the combination of those two things. If you only have perception, you'll get people in the door, but you won't be able to keep them. If you only have expertise, you'll get a few through the door, and you'll likely keep those few. But without the combination, you won't have authority. And without that authority that is relative to the market you're trying to reach, you're going to have a lot of difficulty with content. All right. Anything on authority?
I just had a question, and we got some coming from the audience too. Lead flow, like if somebody's really good at marketing and they get a bunch of leads, sometimes I see that, and then like the retention or the expertise is not really there, and the refund rate is high, or the disgruntlement. But I also see a lot of the opposite, where especially in the LifterLMS community, we have a lot of people with expertise that don't have lead flow. So what's the key to unlocking that? I mean, it's like, I guess it's developing authority, but why is that such a common problem?
I think first off, just buying things online is still pretty new. buying courses online is there's still a lot of mistrust in buying courses online because the people who have great perception and horrible reality.
Yeah.
I've definitely spent $1,000 on courses that were worth maybe 10.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to build up that lead flow, we'll get into strategies for that a little later in the talks. But the few things that I recommend off the bat are, I love ads, because if your content's good and you run like the right AdWords campaign, if you actually know the people you're reaching out to, know the people you want to be coming in and buying this course, the right AdWords campaign should perform. If you're just not great at marketing, you don't know how to write copy that sells, you don't know any of that stuff, then start with one-on-one sales. Like, actually reach out to the people who are that exact market, your friends who are in that same audience, the people you created the course for, because there's probably somebody who asked you, hey, how do you do this? And you just got tired of answering at some point, so you made a course.
Yeah.
Start with those people. Reach out, let them know, talk about it at conferences, and then over time, build up enough sales, set aside a little money so you can put some budget into hiring somebody who actually knows how to do that marketing stuff. Because I don't recommend every expert become a marketer, nor do I recommend every marketer become an expert in something else. So if you're good at one and you like that one, stick with it, grind out the little stuff until you can get somebody in play to fill in the gaps.
We've got a question from Arnold, and Arnold, you may need to ask this a different way, but he's asking, between videos and your syllabus, or like if you expose your, the course curriculum outline, what should course creators focus on to demonstrate authority? Like, by showing our table of contents, does that help? And then also, what type of video would be most effective at establishing authority, let's say to warm traffic or whatever?
So the table of contents, I don't think that helps prove authority unless you're reaching the right market. Because like, if I look at the table of contents for a course on content marketing, I'm looking for very specific things to be in it to see if it's useful. But most of the time, people aren't going to use the same terms as me, or they might just have, okay, maybe they've got one section on positioning or one section on just research, and that might include the other one in it. And so the table of contents might help, but I'm generally inclined to think likely only for somebody who's just about ready to buy. When it comes to video, social proof. The testimonial video is your best option. If you don't have the testimonial video, then the video of you, the course creator, talking about why you are a legitimate option for this course, why you ended up creating it, why you have the expertise, that would be where I'd go instead.
Dawn asks, like, from a timing perspective, how many minutes should like any kind of video be? This is a common question we get, but it might be a little outside the scope of this presentation. But let's say we're doing a testimonial video or a sales video, or we're making one of our lessons free and easily accessible so that people can get a free sample. What kind of length is required for authority to be established?
Length has nothing to do with it.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the answer, whenever a writer asks me how long a blog post needs to be, my answer is as long as it needs to be to answer all the questions associated with it. Same for a video. Though, if you're running it as an ad, if you're running it on a sales page, if it's your intro video at the top of the site, you're probably going to want to keep it to the shorter side. The rule that I try to write a script for is landing page, we either do a 30-second or 90-second. And for like a sales page or something like that, there's no limit. Just making sure, though, I like to use video hosting software that can track those and sync up with my marketing automation.
Yeah.
So if I see somebody actually watch the video, then we get a little ping and put them in a different category.
Gotcha. Don's also asking just the best link for a course. I'll take that one. If you have a lot of content, should you create a large course or several smaller courses? It depends. You can have giant courses if they're super relevant, but one of the most dangerous things that expert can do is build this massive library of expertise, like 300 lessons of just all this awesome stuff that they know without really getting into, organizing it, curating it, teaching specific processes and, behavior changes and stuff like that. So typically, if you're asking that question, usually the answer is to break it up. But it is possible to have a very large course as long as it's super relevant and it's something the market desperately wants and is going to stay motivated through. So,
yeah, I'd second that. The biggest thing we see with big content is trying to address too many specific pain points, too many specific problems and questions, and you lose the overall message as a result.
cool. Well, I think that's it for the questions for now.
All right, let's talk budgeting. So, comes down to two things: time and money. If you don't have one, you need the other. And the one you need to get started is time, because no matter what you do, there's still going to be a little bit of time associated with it. Though, in my experience, generally, you can have very little time associated if you have a lot of money. Though, my guess is if you're watching this and working on your course, you don't want to put $20,000, $30,000 into marketing your course. So what we'll be talking about today is based on the idea of having about 2 hours. And that's 2 hours per whatever period of time you want to be putting out your content on. So if you want weekly content, I'd set aside about 2 hours a week. If you want monthly content, I'd set aside about 2 hours a month. And as you can see right on the slide, 2 hours, that's 2 podcasts or about 1 good blog post.
So is this time to, sorry to interrupt, is this to create it and promote it or just create it?
Just create it.
Okay.
Yeah. So promotion is going to take you a good bit more time. And as we'll talk about, promotion is really 90% of the game. 10% is creating great content. 10% is creating, or we'll do 80-20 since that's the hot phrase these days. So 20% of your time could be spent creating the course. 80% of the time is going to be should be spent promoting it, because if nobody knows about it, it's going to do you no good. And it's the exact same with content. And one of the reasons I really love talking about courses here, because courses are content, plain and simple. And the best content marketing is giving away stuff that people should have to pay for. And the best courses are that stuff being paid for. So knowing that, promotion, hands down, the most important part of creating any sort of content. I mentioned paid ads before as a good way to promote. I also really love what I call community-based promotion, which is when you interact with different Facebook groups, Reddit channels, you get involved in those groups where the people you're trying to sell to live. You give value first. You show your expertise by responding to questions and posts. And then you let them know that you have this thing and they can pay you for it too. And so that goes back to the farming, right? We're putting in all that time interacting with the community and watering it and nurturing it. And then maybe it's a month later, we go ahead and let them know, hey, I'm getting ready to launch my course. I'd love some feedback from you guys. Here's the sample video. Here's the sample lesson that's already out. How can I make it better? Paid advertising, you want to make sure people are buying it before you put money in ads. I'm sure you've all heard the stories. I hear one just about every week of, yeah, I paid so-and-so $30,000 and they put up my funnel and we ran Facebook ads and we got back 3,000. And I never want to touch paid ads again. That's a bad experience and that's common. But if you're already selling and you've got good stuff, paid ads are a great way to pour gasoline on the fire. Public relations, just appearing in media outlets that are relevant to your audience to talk about your topic and putting that little call to action whenever you appear. Hey, go check out this thing. You can find lessons like it and more is a very simple way and a great way to put an hour a week to use. If you take an hour a week and you spend 15 minutes researching 4 different people who discuss the topic and then spend another 10 minutes each writing out an email to them, pitching you in some capacity to follow up on a previous article that they wrote or to talk about your view of a different angle towards a piece that they just put out, you're going to get press. If you don't get press, then maybe nobody writes about it. But I've yet to see that strategy fail. And it's a really great way to get started because you can have some big wins. The combination we generally recommend for people who are time limited on promotion are going to be community promotion because they're often already in those groups. Public relations because it's easy to get started. It's a pretty simple concept to wrap your head around and you can do it with very little time commitment. And then number 4, my personal favorite, content partnerships, which is actually what we're doing right now with this webinar. We're creating a piece of content together, 2 personalities, 2 brands, Chris and I, LifterLMS and Call for Content, coming together to create a piece of content that is addressed towards the overlap in our audiences. And those are emails that are pretty easy to write. Same hour a week, pick out 4 in 15 minutes, go write 4 emails, and then set aside the time to actually appear on them. But content partnerships are hands down one of the most effective ways to grow your list, grow your audience, and prove your authority to them at the same time, which is why we love them at Call for Content. Influencer outreach, number 5, is not my personal favorite because there's so much buzz around it right now. It's hard to find the truth. But the real core is reaching out on social, reaching out via email, letting these influencers know that you've produced this course, and because you have this course to sell, there's likely a way to reach out to them and say, hey, check out, this section. Does this look relevant to your audience? And if so, how could we do something together, either transitioning it into a content partnership or just tagging them on social, finding when they put something out that's related to your course, combining them into a new post, and hopefully getting reshared by them in the future. Now, I brought up this exact flow earlier, and the reason I wanted to bring it up again is because it does work extraordinarily well, and it's very low cost to produce. Build a list, call it 50 or 100 of the people you would absolutely love to do a content partnership with. And look at, do they publish ebooks, or do they do webinars, or do they have a podcast? Those are really the three best ways in my experience to partner with them on content. Though big blog posts work well too. Develop a podcast specifically to network and reach those people. And when I say reach, I mean have on as a guest. Invite them on as guests. And then after the fantastic episode you have together, after that great conversation where they get to know you, follow up and invite them to do a webinar with you, to create that ebook or to create a blog post. Or if you're going to do the podcast avenue, then when you invite them to do like a podcast together, make it that one of you is guesting on the other show, and that you then both put that show in your podcast feed. And so then you get shared to their entire podcast audience. And all of those work. We've run them all internally. I've seen people build businesses on them. And if you want to promote and you don't have that much time, take your course, start your podcast, and use that podcast to funnel into partnerships. And so then you get the content of the show every episode. Plus you get the audience growth that comes from the content partnership following up. And we'll pause for questions.
Very cool. Paul had a question, thoughts on using affiliates to promote your course, especially offering affiliate opportunities to existing students. Where does that fit into your stack, or do you see it as kind of outside of that? And what are your thoughts on affiliate marketing for course creators?
So I think it works for course creators. It's not something we do much of. And while we'll use this same strategy to help develop affiliate partnerships, I think there's a lot of work that goes into building and maintaining a solid affiliate network. And in my experience, that's often where most people fail. They might get 100 affiliates, but only 2 of them bring in real revenue. And I would rather look at that 100, find those 2, and then develop a strategy to get 10 more, just like those 2 affiliates who are making real sales, than just continuing to widen and widen my network. And so I think it's the same solutions, but it's a problem I don't work with quite as much, so I can't really dig in on success.
You said something a little bit ago about your content marketing being as good as your paid content or your course content, and that, you know, one really good piece of content is better than 10 mediocre pieces of content. Could you highlight that? Like, first, are you saying that your free content should literally be as good as one of your best lessons in your course, or one of your trainings in your membership? And if so, can you just motivate the people out there? Because one of the things I see course creators do is they're very busy, and they often spend a lot of time creating content behind the paywall in the course or the membership. But when it comes to like a lead magnet or some kind of free content, it's usually not the same amount of effort. Can you talk about like making really good free content and how valuable it should be, and motivate people on the importance of it?
Yeah. So yes, your free content should be as good, if not better, than your paid content. Because if you're not giving me anything good for free, why should I pay you? if your free content doesn't really prove your expertise, it doesn't really show your authority, then I'm not going to trust you enough to click buy. That's the simple answer. The expanded answer, the example I really like to give is call for content. We put out 3 playbooks. Each one walks through the process we use for that service. And so if somebody says, I don't have enough money, here's the playbook, go do it yourself. We built the playbooks that we publish out based off of the internal standard operating procedures we use to do the work. And likewise, now when we create a course for a client, when we create any sort of content for a client, if we know that it's that big piece, little piece, we plan them both from the start, and we use the same knowledge and expertise from one to create the other. So an example that we're working through right now, we're helping a client put together an audio course with a companion workbook as a PDF ebook. And we are creating, for the title page of each chapter within the ebook, an infographic. And the lead magnet download will be those infographics bundled together into like an 8-page ebook that just gives you the broad overview, gives you a couple quick wins, and shows you the quality of content that you're going to get inside.
So why do you have 3 playbooks? And y'all should head over to callforcontent.com to check those out. But why 3 playbooks instead of daily blogging?
I don't have time to blog daily.
Yeah.
I'm not great at thinking of something that I want to write about every day. You don't need all that daily blogging content. You need a few good pieces so you can spend the rest of the time promoting them. And we've updated 2 of those playbooks now. We update them once every 6 months to a year. And then we spend the rest of the time working on our ad campaigns and working on our outreach, and me coming on and talking about things like this. And the rest of the time is spent promoting because we know our content's good.
I really like the name Playbook because people don't really want information. They want like a process and a system to follow, which ebook is just like electronic information. But a playbook by design is, it's like X's and O's on a field. It's like a system, which I think is really cool. I think that's a great name. So I'm just admiring that.
Thanks.
We're getting a question from the audience. Rachel's asking, what is a playbook exactly? Do you want to describe that?
Yeah. So for us, a playbook is an end-to-end description of the strategy and walkthrough of the process that goes into one of the things that we do. So that's super vague, so I'm going to give a specific example. Most of this presentation comes out of the Authority Marketing Playbook. And the Authority Marketing Playbook is a summary of about the first 60 to 90 days of a client engagement with us. It's content research, it's positioning, it's strategy, and then getting into a little bit of partnerships and promotion. And so we had done a few engagements and we had started to get our process really locked in. And that's when we knew it was time. Okay, let's take all these internal documents and turn them into something that somebody else could use. And that's how we got to the playbook. So that way, if you follow the playbook, if you read through it and follow the instructions and use the worksheets that come with it from end to end, when you're done, you have a strategy to position yourself as an authority using content, because that's the goal we wanted at the end.
I like what you said earlier about having something for people to get into who aren't ready to buy, because you're busting a myth, kind of a modern myth of like, you always have to go up market, charge the most possible, and just optimize for hot leads and automate everything to hot. But if you slow it down, and if somebody doesn't quite qualify based on budget, you can still help them with your playbook, and that helps them get results, they'll be back when they have, and now they're going to have budget. So it's
and they'll have followed my instructions already, so they'll be a perfect client.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's good too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. If somebody asks me to help and I don't have a way to help them, then I'm not doing my job right. Because at the end of the day, as a content creator, as an expert, as an authority, your job is to help as many people as possible. Because those people, if they talk good about you, that good press, all that good chatter will eventually turn into good sales.
We've got a question from Dawn about really just content type, like whether that's video or slide decks, talking head, slide deck. I'll add to your question, Dawn, like audio, text, like what's better for content? I mean, I think that's a massive "it depends" answer myself, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it depends is my first answer. If you're time constrained, start with audio or video, unless you're a good writer. And the reason I say start with audio or video is because you can have it transcribed for next to nothing and get that out as a secondary piece of content in another form. And that's actually something we're going to talk about. I think it's in this section in content planning. And that's called content repurposing. But video and audio repurpose better than text, which is why I like to start there.
Rachel this is kind of a legal question. It's probably, we're not lawyers, so we can't really answer that, but she's asking about copywriting or copyrighted content before you put it online or put it into a downloadable. I don't think copyright just kind of happens when you publish something. Trademarking, now that's something different, but I can't really give any kind of legal advice around that. But I have had people take my content or other tools I provide and then resell it and do stuff with it on their own. And in my opinion, that's just a sign of product market fit and flattery. So, and when it makes sense, you can take legal action, but I can't really give legal advice. Do you have any comment, Michael, on copywriting or exposing your secret sauce?
Yeah. I mean, on the other people stealing your content, like, it's almost never worth your time to go after them. On the side of you borrowing other people's content or using it, I think if you give proper attribution to the person using it, they are rarely going to be angry. And if it's digital, you can pretty much always take it down.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, I think that's it for questions now.
Great. And let's move into content planning. There's really only two ways to do it. There's only two ways to do any sort of planning or research. And they're laid out right here. You can go top down from what you know, or you can go bottom up and do real research. I like to find a healthy balance, though in my experience, most of the time people think they're going to be okay with only top down, and then they don't do okay, and then they hire call for content, and then we do a bunch of research, and then we find out from bottom up that maybe only half of what they thought top down was correct. Because especially with experts more than with any other group, you forget how little the people you're working with know. And so you end up talking over their heads or not addressing the problem that they come to you with before addressing the real root issue underneath. And so make sure to do both, I guess, is really the summary of this slide. You want to, if you've got the top down, just by the fact that if you've created a course, you know something, and you created it for an audience, but do the bottom up. And if you haven't created your course yet, do the bottom up and use that to help inform how you're going to create your course so that it solves the needs of the audience, as well as giving them the expertise and the advice that you think they need. And don't sweat SEO. Google gets better at interpreting this fuzziness every day. And when people search for things over time, Google makes major updates to figure out not what they're searching for and see that match, but what they actually want to know the answer to and find that match. And so if you create really great content and you've done your research and the stuff you create is designed to reach the audience and designed to answer their questions, it will naturally rank over time. And it might not get to the top, but it'll get you some traffic. And that's really where I'd stop with SEO, because it's a whole lot of work, and I'm not about the daily blogs and all that stuff. So my strategy, yeah, it works. It's slower, it's steady, but when you lock in, you're locked in. And really, the whole crux of content planning is you don't see anything about consistency in here. You didn't see anything about planning your editorial calendar and getting 1,000 topics. That's because if you do your research right, as we'll discuss in the final section, if you know your audience well, then you will always have things to answer, because it could be as simple as a question that somebody emailed to you when they were halfway through your course on some little detail that you bring up one time. That question can turn into a whole piece of content. Yeah. So let's move on to research, assuming there are no questions.
I just had a quick question. Content surveys versus, based on your experience as an expert. How do we do that well? And the reason I ask is, I'm constantly asking my audience, like, what they're struggling with and whatnot. But I see a lot of beginners or just marketing folk. They'll let's say they're targeting my community of course creators on Facebook. They'll drop in as a brand new member, and their very first post is, hey, can I get your opinion on something? What are you struggling with right now? And I know they're trying to do market research, but they haven't earned trust. People don't know who they are, and there's no context for the question. What's the right way to do a customer survey?
Yeah. So if you're doing a survey, you're not speaking with them directly. And that's important, because it means you don't have the ability to dig in on their answers. The right way to do a survey is, one, to give a reason for it. So, hey guys, I'm creating a course for you, and this is what my first lesson looks like. This is my table of contents. Am I on the right track? And that should not be the first post you ever make with that account there.
Yeah.
You should already have been hanging out there for a couple of weeks and seeing the questions that other people ask and seeing the responses and the answers and the whole community's interactions. And then after that 2, 3, 4 weeks, once you know the community, once they've seen your face about a couple of times, then you can drop in with your survey. And so I guess the important part is build trust first.
Yeah, that's great.
Survey.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And my hands down favorite way to do research is direct interviews. I like to get on the phone with somebody who either has bought or is a perfect fit to buy and talk with them. And you can see the template that we design our interview questions off of. You can find that in the Authority Marketing Playbook. It's under interview our clients' clients or interview your clients. I don't quite recall the exact heading, but it's pretty noticeable in the table of contents. And you just want to talk with them. You want to get to know them. You want to know where they hang out online, who they ask questions to. If you're creating a course, to go back to my dad for a minute, if you're creating that course for multifamily commercial real estate investors in the St. Louis area, there's like 1,000 or 2,000 people you can ask. So get on the phone with them. Now that's super targeted, but if you're creating a course for small business owners, let's say, or to get a little more specific, for the independent chiropractor, if you're creating a course for that independent chiropractor, get on the phone with a dozen chiropractors and talk with them about their business. Take a couple out to happy hour if you can. Loosen them up a bit and see, because one of them might put his head in his hands and say, I get people in the door all day, but I do not know how to sell them on a recurring package. And that could be one of the primary parts of your course then on how to improve their business. So direct interviews, I cannot stress that enough. And from those interviews, you've got to use your blending stick. And for those of you who don't know what a blending stick is,
I don't know.
This is a charcoal drawing on the left. And not a photo, though photorealistic. You see how the shadows are sort of smudges almost? That's from taking lumps of charcoal, putting a line of charcoal down, and then using a tightly rolled piece of paper called a blending stick to scratch back and forth, pick up some of the charcoal, and blend and smooth in the rest of it. And so that's how we get these beautiful lines and shadows. And that's how we get the softness of the overall image, is by blending together the hard lines of the charcoal. And so, just like we use a blending stick when we're doing a charcoal drawing, we want to take those interviews and the surveys and all the information we gather about the customers. Maybe you go on Amazon and you look at reviews for books that have come out in the same topics. You look at the 1 stars and you see where people complained. You take all that information and you take your blending stick and you blend it all together to end up with a few personas that are really your ideal market, that tell you who you're trying to reach. And I like to name those personas based off of the person I interview who is closest to the actual persona. And I like to include all the information of the original people as well. And so you take all your research, you look for the generalities, the overlaps between them, and you use that to develop the personas of your ideal customers. And I'll press pause here on research before we move on to how you actually turn all this research, all this content, and make contact with people to turn it into sales.
What issue I see with people, you mentioned direct one-on-one interviews, and also earlier in the presentation, you mentioned direct selling as a way to get started. I see some people try to automate things like too early, or just try to try to limit the amount of human interaction, direct human to one-on-one interaction, even when they're just starting. How can you kind of explain the value of going direct to people that may think they're supposed to automate everything from day one.
So the goal is to automate everything.
Yeah.
But there's a whole pathway in between. And if I can't sell somebody something directly, then they're never going to buy it from me online. And similarly, if I only research what people put out, the publicly available knowledge, I'm never going to get the real deep pains that make great content. And so you have to go direct. And maybe you have an email list, maybe you can sell without doing it. But if you want the best feedback that you can get, and you do want the best feedback that you can get as early as possible, you've got to pick up the phone or send that email. And it's got to be actually personal. Because the whole point of automation and scaling is to make personalization appear even when you're not doing it. And if you don't take the initial steps, then you're never going to know how to make it look personal when you get up to automation.
What about like, is there, like, for personas, this is a personal issue that I struggle with, so I'm looking to learn from you. If you have like a horizontal market as opposed to something that's like tightly vertically integrated, where, you know, there's this learning happening with like artists and musicians and business people and all these like relationships and personal development, and that's just the like the expert industry and the coaching industry, and then there's these other use cases out there. Where should we like focus if we're looking to do more to develop personas? Because I feel like I could come up with like 20.
Good question. Who gives you money?
Yeah.
So you're looking, when we're doing this for B2B services, we look at speed to close, and we look at lifetime value, and we look at enjoyment to work with. Those are the three major factors. So for courses, you're not really working with them. I'd be looking at speed to buy. So when they see your product, do they see an instant fit and want to purchase? And I'd be looking at ability to purchase. And so that means, do they have a clear understanding of how they're going to make money, how they're going to track this back to making money from the start? And I realize that not everyone is out here to make money, but you need enough to keep whatever you're doing going. And so that being the case, with call for content, with the podcasting things we do, we generally avoid podcasts that target consumers, and, you know, we don't do the Marvel show, because the Marvel show needs 20,000 listeners to just start making a little bit of cash.
Right.
And so similarly, when you're looking to segment, look at the people who are going to get the most value out fastest, because those are the people that are going to be easiest for you to show them the value in the first place.
That's helpful. I appreciate that. Yeah. So the B2B and the ones that aren't in a long sales cycle, and even though we still, like, you know, experience customer support and stuff like that. So there is some joy to work with factor, or people that are, you know, have the best experiences and that kind of thing. So
yeah,
appreciate that.
Customer support also, that there's a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
And it can get pretty heavy. So if there's a subsection of the market that specializes in, like, I'm going to pick one out because I know they're fussy clients, in health and beauty.
Yeah.
And they come to you 10 times more often because none of them know anything about WordPress. None of them really know how to work with the stuff they've got. And they then end up costing you 3 times as much in support. that might be a market to shy away from in advertising.
Another one that is like in terms of the ability to purchase is when people are already making revenue with their expertise. Like it's not that they have a day job and they're trying to get out or they're trying to strike out on their own. They've already struck out on their own, and maybe they're doing the author, nonfiction book author, the speaker. They're already kind of figured out how to, package at least through a different medium their skills and experience. So they're not new to the rodeo, if you will.
Yeah. And we won't work with somebody if they don't have, for B2B stuff, we won't work with them at all if they do not have at least 5 successful clients. And that it doesn't sound like a high bar, but it weeds out a lot of people along the way where we won't be able to do our best work, where our systems won't work as well because they don't have the level of success required. And similarly, if you have no audience and you're building your course, if you're not a recognized expert and you're trying to build a course, then you might have to do both at the same time. And if that's the case, then you want to be looking at, okay, how do I use the content I'm creating for my course to help build my expertise in a wider area so that I can reach that audience.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. All right. On to making contact. So I've already started to bring this up. Personalization, personalization, personalization is equal to segmentation, which I see as missing a T. You can only personalize effectively and automate effectively if you segment effectively. And in order for you to segment, you have to do your research so you can identify the differences between the various segments in your audience and identify the ones that are most profitable so that you can build out your automations to scale contact with them. It's really simple when you think about it, but this is where people mess up with automation almost every time. Lead scoring is featured in a lot of automation software these days. I love it because lead scoring plus tags mean that I can segment my contacts, and that when one of them goes and checks out my sales page, then we can give them a 30-point bump on their lead score because we know that they're super interested in buying then. And if they drop off during checkout, then maybe they're at 60%. And that allows me to create more personalized messages for them because the chiropractor who I've already tagged as being somebody who doesn't manage their own website and doesn't know anything about building courses or digital marketing or any of that. What do I want to do with them? Well, I want to put them through a different pathway, a different set of automations than the guy who manages his own site, who builds most of his practice on digital, and who's looking for advice on a different subject. Because those various angles, those different segments of the market need different messaging because they have different pain points, because they're different personas. Tying it all together for you. And so this is really important to remember. For those of you who have never spent time around a fruit tree, when a fruit tree starts producing fruit, it produces more than you can consume. And so we make jam, and we make eau de vie and whiskey and all the other things that come out of fruit that last a lot longer than just raw fruit. And so if you're taking the time to build the audience, you're taking the approach of farming, you choose audience building over leads, and you're growing that out, then it's going to take longer. And a lot of people give up before they reach that point. I think with call for content, it took me 3 or 4 months before I made my first sale. And then I made so many sales in the next 2 months that we had to press pause and go and rework everything. And that's because I took the time and I knew I was right because I had done my research. And if you follow the process, if you follow the steps, time becomes the big factor. And I would honestly, if you're doing something with content and you're doing something in digital, if you're building a course, I'd expect 6 to 12 months before you maybe even get your first sale, which is why picking up the phone and calling for the sales might be really important at the beginning. But if you take the time and you build it right, then it will pay off. And so this is a very different slide than farming. And at Call for Content, we work with a lot of coaches, executive coaches and business coaches and coaches for entrepreneurs and consultants. And they build these specialized lists. And they often run courses that are more like workshops over the course of 6 or 8 weeks. And so that requires time on their part to interact with the community of the course. And for them, we see the best results with an annual or a biannual launch, but with having that gate up and saying, oh, you want this? It's not available just yet, but it will be. We open the gates twice a year. We open the gates 3 times a year, whatever it is. And you can sign up then. And then the rest of the time, the content is little snippets, little samples, all building up and building that relationship for, oh, hey, the course is open. You know, you've loved the content, and going back to our segmentation and our tagging and our lead scoring, maybe there's a group of people who open every single one of your emails in between launches. And they see all this great content, but then why don't they buy when the launch comes? Well, maybe it's because the launch messaging isn't targeted to somebody who already knows all this stuff. And so maybe you need a separate segment just for those people who are avid consumers of your free stuff. And maybe there's a group out there that doesn't really look at most of your stuff, but they always click on your articles about lead generation. And so if that's the case, then you want to tag them and have your launch messaging focus on lead generation, because that's what they're interested in. That's most likely what they're going to buy based on. And so one of the reasons we really like the launch is because it gives us the time to do research and to replan and reposition, and then gives that single point when we know, okay, did this stuff work? Did it make sales? Yes, no. If no, what do we do differently? If yes, great, how do we do it better? And that concludes our presentation. I know I started dropping a lot of different angles at the end there for good. Making contact, because it really can go any way. But you need to build the business that matches your budget, time and money, so that you can have a steady growth of your course over time. And for our clients, time being the constraint, we create courses that give their audience a bit of their time, and we create courses that limit the time commitment as well.
That's awesome. Well, everyone here who's listening, you have a content marketing expert here, and content is my preferred method of marketing. And if you have questions, now's your chance to get them answered or get Michael's feedback on them. Paul asks, you have mentioned tags a lot. What CRM do you use to manage these?
So I personally like ActiveCampaign. It's a super versatile CRM. And it's also marketing automation all in one. If you use Autopilot, or I think MailChimp has them as well, most marketing automation programs are going to have the tags. For CRMs, some of them do, some of them don't.
Yeah, I'm a ActiveCampaign user myself and really enjoy it. And I've just recently gotten into the understanding of the lead scoring. But for those of you that don't know what that is, your CRM is aware of what they're doing on your website and in your emails and stuff. So you can give them points that last for a certain amount of time. Like Michael mentioned, if they visit your sales page or they visit your pricing page or they open an email or click the link on an email, they can be getting points stacked up, which is an interesting dimension of segmentation based on how engaged they are, which is really cool.
Yeah, and so that lets you segment on warmth as well as personas, which, giving those two sides, I think of it as like an XY, lets you focus on, first you build out the top right where they're the warmest leads in your most dedicated best buyer segment. And then over time, you build out your automations for the other areas.
What could you give an example of like a business? Let's maybe use your chiropractor example. And I had to crack up, by the way, when you said you're talking to them and they loosen up. You loosen them up because usually they loosen people up, which is funny. What would be an example of, let's say we're not restricted by geography. We don't care where the chiropractor is in the world, but we have a business in the box training course designed to get chiropractors more leads and sales and just market effectively or train somebody on their team to or whatever. What would be an example of having more than one persona than just chiropractic business owner?
Yeah. So first off, there's size of business. And along with that, I'll put length of business in there. So the guy who's fresh out of chiropractic school,
the newbie,
is in a very different position than the one who's just started struggling in the past 10 years because digital's been eating away at their business or because their clientele died. If they focus on an old segment of the market, sorry, not old, elderly. If they've got a good digital presence versus not having one, that can make a huge difference for the chiropractor. If they are in a major metro area versus not, those are large differences as well. And going on that, for the chiropractors, that's a local business. So there's no way that you can skip over segmenting by geography, because the US market is so incredibly different than, say, the UK market. You need to know the differences and you need to speak to them. So there's half a dozen different angles off the bat. But then going in on the female chiropractor versus male, there is going to be a difference in communication between them in all likelihood, and likely in clientele. I don't know what the stigmas are, but I assume there are some with one gender or the other, because in any sort of, I know in masseuses there's a huge amount. I hear people all the time saying, hey, I only want a man or I only want a woman for this reason, X, Y, Z. And so knowing all those things will give you a better understanding of where somebody might slot in. And normally it's only a few of those characteristics that really matter for the personas. but we want to get them all at first so we know which ones to blend away.
Wow, that's awesome. Marissa asks, what do you think about live streaming versus podcasting, for example? The benefits of live streaming content versus, the pre-recorded kind of podcast style. Does it matter?
Mm-hmm. So the quick answer that I always like to give that's a little blunt is I live stream so I have a recording afterwards.
Yeah.
But the big benefit to live streaming in most cases is that little notification that pops up on everyone when you're streaming. As I'm sure you know with Facebook, when that notification pops up, it can make a difference. And I prefer to focus on recorded because I don't like the stress of live stuff most of the time, or the requirements of forcing it to meet all of my time constraints. But that's really personal preference. And when it comes to podcasting, I don't see any reason you can't live stream the recording and then post an edited copy after. In fact, I've done that on many occasions.
Marissa has a follow-up question. She uses something called Restream.io. Are you familiar with that, or do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, they just had an AppSumo deal, didn't they? I think they did, or
It
one
looks
might
like
have.
it looks like it's the best way to stream live to 30 plus platforms simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a hub where you can stream out multiple places.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to use one or something like it, just because it's easier to manage your live streams then, and you can broadcast to more places. But that's really an advantage in distribution and ease of use over anything else.
Paul asks, thank you for your answers so far. He has a fear around putting out too much free content as it dilutes his course content. Why should they buy when I give so much away for free? This is a common question around information-based products in general, but how do you take that head on?
Yeah, so I look at it two ways. One is structure, and one is accessibility. So yes, they might be able to get everything that you talk about in your course by reading through all of your free content, but it's not distilled down anywhere except in the course. And so that's structure, where the course has a very structured format, the goal of which is to educate you on a topic or help you through a problem, whereas the free content is designed to give you a little snippet, an idea to work off of. And then the other side, accessibility. Your free content might not include an easy way for them to ask you a question. And so then the course really becomes a way for somebody to opt in to easier communication with you, the expert, to answer those questions. And at the end of the day, we really try to focus on creating a planned limited amount of free content around the course when we plan the course. And then we're not going to create more content around the same topic in the future. And so then if we're still selling that same course and we need more content to sell that course, we'll go back to the personas and see what other things they talk about that are directly related to what the course is offering, and use those as ways to attract more of those same target audiences.
That's awesome. We've got some more questions for you, but I wanted to call out your authority marketing playbook, and we'll put a link in the chat. That's call for content /AMP. what is Call for Content, Michael, and what can people expect if they download the Authority Marketing Playbook?
Yeah. So Call for Content is a podcasting agency these days. We started out as a B2B content marketing agency, and then we found out that we really loved working with podcasts, and they're a whole lot easier to create than blogs. So we went that avenue. We specialize in research-first content creation and marketing, which means we do all this research, and we do the direct customer research, which a lot of people try to skip over. Maybe they just go straight to keywords for SEO. We're unlikely to look up a keyword until right before we publish the article. And so if you go to Playbooks, you download the Authority Marketing Playbook, you're actually going to get a PDF plus a set of Google worksheets that walk you through how to position yourself as an authority in a targeted niche market based off of prior success with that market or prior proof of authority. And you can find the entire thing is posted as text online. And that's why we've got a nice little table of contents on the left now. But if you want a PDF, download it. And that's how you get all those extra workbook resources as well.
That's awesome. And Michael's offering a 10% discount to anyone who mentions LifterLMS webinar if you decide to work with them. What kind of work do you do for Call for Content clients?
Yeah, so we break our work into two primary service lines. One is authority marketing, and the other one is podcasting. And so they both have a simple little introductory engagement. For authority marketing, we price it at $2,500, and it's a 6-week engagement that we call the customer research and content strategy. And it's designed to take somebody from, I've had some success in my business, but I have no idea how to get started with content, to I now know my personas, I know who I'm trying to reach, I know where to reach them, and I have a strategy to get me started with my first 12 pieces of content. And then for podcasting, we have what we call the audience research and valuation. It's priced at $500. It's 4 weeks long, nowhere near as intensive as the customer research and content strategy. And that's designed to take somebody from, I have an audience and either I don't know what to sell to them or I don't know how to grow them effectively, and take that person to, I have a much better understanding of the personas within my audience, and I have some strategies, some ideas on how to grow from there. And so those ideas could be ways to grow the audience size or ways to monetize the audience.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned research is a part of what you do, and like you're just spending a lot of time being intentional and not getting on like the content treadmill or whatever.
I like that.
And you said you work with people that they need to have 5 successful outcomes for their learners. I think we forget that as course creators sometimes. If you're an expert, let's say you have a job and you've developed this expertise on the job, but if you haven't gone out, so now you have one outcome, which was for your boss or the business you worked at. But if you haven't gone out on your own and delivered that similar results, like as a consultant or whatever, it's, before you start automating everything, it makes sense to do a lot of that one-on-one stuff you're talking about before scaling too early. So I was just admiring what you were saying there. What you've kind of covered it in the show, but I just want to really drive it home and ask you, what advice do you have just in general about doing this research, developing our customer avatars, being conscious about which types of customers are easiest to work with, perhaps the most valuable, the easiest to sell to, how do we wrap our arms around this kind of quantitative and qualitative beast of research and avatar development and all this?
So start with the research. Start really small. Start with a cup of coffee or a phone call. If you've already made sales, reach out to a couple of people, shoot them an email, say, hey, I'm looking to create version 2.0. You've gone through the course. How do I make it better? What questions does it leave you with at the end? Or if you're just getting started, thinking about making a course, then have that cup of coffee, have that conversation, and just talk with them. And then halfway through, toss up the idea, I'm thinking about creating a course for chiropractors like you. What would you want to see in that? If you're selling something that can be marketed B2B, just get on LinkedIn and send LinkedIn messages. Half a dozen people or a dozen people that would fit. And say, hey, I'm doing market research. I want to create a course for you guys. Would you mind hopping on a 10-minute call? Would you mind hopping on a 15-minute call? And that's really where I'd start. If you're trying to figure out just how do I even talk to these people about, like, I'm the guy to make this or I'm the gal to make this, then what I'd recommend is, and this exercise is in the authority marketing playbook as well, we call it an authority roadmap. List out what you've done that would prove your authority, what you are currently doing that proves your authority or expertise, and then look at where you're going next and look at what you're trying to do to prove that authority in the future. Now, one of those things is likely creating a course, but maybe it's also, oh, I'm going to be the keynote speaker at a conference in 6 months. Well, if you're going to be the keynote speaker at that conference in 6 months and that conference is on the same topics as your course, then I'd want to have a sample of my course ready in those 6 months so that when somebody goes to see my keynote, they'll be able to get in the door. And so when you look at that in the 3 steps, what's happened, what am I doing now, what am I going to be doing in the future, it really can help snap everything into alignment.
Fantastic. Well, Michael Greenberg, he's from Call for Content. I'd encourage you to go download his Authority Marketing Playbook. That's at callforcontent.com/AMP. And he's got frameworks, he's got steps to move and put all this into action for your business. We are going to draw our LifterLMS winner here of the call. And while we're pulling that, this is recorded. So if you registered for the webinar, you are going to get the replay, and it's always going to be available at the bottom of the LifterLMS website in the webinars area. And congratulations to Sarah Shebear. You are the winner of the $99 LifterLMS add-on. If you're already a customer, we'll add that value to your existing license, but shoot us an email at team@lifterlms.com. If you decide to work with Michael, beyond executing his playbook and getting results from that, he's offering a generous 10% discount on his services there if you mention the LifterLMS webinar. So thank you, Michael, for your generosity on that. Any final words for the people before we sign off today?
Yeah, I host office hours. They're free. I have them a couple times a week. And if you think of a question later and you just want to ask me, or you want to actually walk through some of this process for your specific case, hours through the chat bot. I'll work through it. It's free. It gives me great new content to put out later because every question you ask turns into something for me. And yeah, I love chatting with people, especially about content and courses and marketing and all this fun stuff.
That's awesome. Well, we share that. I call it a frontline focus with your community. So you're not hard to get a hold of and connect with. So that's awesome. Again, Michael's over at callforcontent.com. Michael, thank you so much for doing this training with us today. I really appreciate it. And you're getting a bunch of thanks in the comments and over on the YouTube live as well. So thanks for coming on. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. Been a lot of fun.